Are those all Rebecca's things down there?
Yes. Yes, they are.
What did you use the cottage for?
The boat used to be moored near there.
What boat? What happened to it? Was that the boat she was sailing in when she was drowned?
Yes. Capsized and sank. She was washed overboard.
Wasn't she afraid to go out like that alone?
She wasn't afraid of anything.
If you love listening to this show, please consider giving a rating and a review on Amazon Alexa or wherever you listen. We want to continue bringing you this amazing content, and part of our ability to do that means that we need a big audience. Now, it may not seem like much, but rating and reviewing the show will help more people find us, just like how you found this show. Simply on any podcast platform, search for a show, scroll down to the bottom, and push 5 stars. It's that easy. Thanks for supporting the show. So today I'm joined by Rebecca David, who is the founder of Give. Welcome to the show today.
Thank you for having me.
So Rebecca, you worked at Veris Wealth Partners as well as Stakeholder Capital, where they focus on impact wealth management. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about your experience with impact investing and working with ultra-high net worth individuals as well as organizations.
Sure. Yeah, so I started my career in very traditional finance. I worked in institutional sales at a large bank. And at the same time I started my career, I joined the Junior Board of UNICEF. And I quickly saw that there was an opportunity to use capital markets for good. And I started learning about impact investing. And I was lucky enough to be hired by Veris Wealth Partners, who really is a pioneer in this space. So they're an impact investing wealth management firm. So just like you would think about a traditional financial advisor, they do all of these things. But when it comes to investments, all of the investments are sustainable or impact investments. And many of Veris's clients, for example, are activists and large foundations themselves.
Wonderful. So thank you for that. I wonder, because we've had some pretty senior people that have worked in Wall Street and capital markets and have specifically even overseen sustainability or impact investing or ESG sides, and have provided some pretty transparent insights around the industry and some of the shortcomings from their perspective. So I wonder, having come from that side of the business, both on the institutional as well as on the retail, what do you see as the reality on the ground truth around impact investing, and where do you think we still have to go in terms of shoring up some of those gaps?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I see 2 pain points. I think the first is bringing impact investing to the retail investor, including high net worth. I think that the movement has largely been driven by institutional investors, which is great and important, but there's still a lot of education to be done that this even exists for people. And for a long time, it really was only something that was available to the ultra high net worth because of the lack of product and because of the high minimums. But that's really changed. And now it's something that most everyone can take part in some form. I would say the other pain point that's closely related is educating financial advisors about impact. It's a different language than traditional investing. And even if there is product to put clients into, there's still a ways to go so that advisors feel comfortable with the products and having those kinds of conversations with their clients.
Yeah, I think you bring up some pretty interesting points, certainly in terms of cascading down to the retail investors and making sure that it's in bite-sized forms that allows for them to actually participate. And then, of course, the education and the retraining and even the mindset change of the advisors as well. But I wonder, even at the institutional level, that the way we define impact is, I wonder if we're still quite there yet, in the sense of it's very much of a filtering mechanism. So we don't want tobacco, we don't want oil and gas, and that makes a certain composite or portfolio. But they're not necessarily channeling new capital to new endeavors or green projects that's going to actually make that transition to the newer sustainable world actually happen. So in other words, it's one thing to reallocate portfolio dollars from one to another, but the net really hasn't changed or reduced any type of impact to CO2 greenhouse or the frequency of the hurricanes or the wildfires that we're experiencing.
Yeah, I think I would disagree with that to some extent. If we look at just what impact investing is, so impact investing is investing with the intention to generate a social or environmental impact in addition to a financial return. And so that spans all asset classes, so including cash, all the way through private investments. In regard to the public markets, when you're creating an investment product, and specifically an impact or sustainable investment product, you start with a universe, like a benchmark, for example, like the S&P 500. And then you employ screens or certain analysis, and you narrow down that universe. So I would say that traditionally, socially responsible investing, which is more in line with taking out the bad or the negative. So you're using a screen that is a threshold of revenue to narrow down the universe, like tobacco or divesting from fossil fuels and things like that. But there are investments that are tilted, I would say, towards best in class or high impact solutions. I can, give a few examples if that's helpful. I would say, yes, the majority is kind of taking out these bad actors, but there is really so much more than that now. We've got green bonds and climate change solutions funds and all kinds of credit unions and loan funds that are doing really cool things as well, that are very accessible to many. So I think that there's a lot of different tools that we have. It's just a matter of getting the word out about them.
Yeah, I think you bring up some good points around some of the debt instruments that have actually been growing very rapidly, actually, like the green bonds and different forms of derivatives and so forth, that have built-in mechanisms for both kind of not only commitment but also reporting. And it's interesting in terms of kind of compensating, right, in terms of the lower interest rate, but then with that comes additional sets of requirements and commitments, and it's somewhat kind of self-reinforcing as well. And certainly, all of that is supporting new endeavors and new green projects. So that is true. If you could talk a little bit about private side in terms of private capital, whether it's private equity, venture capital, other forms of direct investment. How and what are you seeing there in terms of impact?
You may also like our quarterly Astor Perkins event that brings some of the most notable experts and category-leading startups in their area of sustainability and human survival on Earth and in space. To register, visit astorperkins.com/events.
Oh gosh, I mean, there's new things every day and really cool work. One of the places I like to look to is the Impact Assets 50. Are you familiar with that? It's kind of a list of, it's both public and private, but largely private managers in the impact space that are doing really great work. I would say a few highlights from that are a newly launched fund. It's called the Decarceration Fund, which not directly related to climate. I think given the events of the last year or so and the fight for social justice is a really neat investment. Lime timber is another one. Timber, I think, is growing in the impact space and elsewhere. And farmland, mental health as well, I think we're seeing and will continue to see a lot more in. So, I think really anything related to any of the SDGs, there's probably a private fund for it at this point. And I think one of the biggest trends is minority entrepreneurs themselves, and having fund managers that are minorities, people of color, women in those roles and investing in them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you're definitely right, and good to point out the ESGs, because I think our show primarily focuses on, I would say, climate change and within the kind of the sustainability umbrella, which is fairly broad, right? So you start to bring in other areas that goes beyond just climate change. So thank you for doing that. I think Europe, there's a lot of things, interesting things happening around both policy, but also the capitalization of some of these private and public vehicles by which new things can be done, including, for example, investment into hydrogen, for instance. So those are all great things. I wonder how, if you had to kind of segment out these ESGs that maps to some of these vehicles, especially like the private vehicles, where do you see are kind of the bigger momentums? Is it more specific to, let's say, climate change? Is it more on the diversity inclusion? Is it more on the social side, for instance, and so forth?
Yeah, I think that these things are all connected, and there is not a single issue that is not affected by climate change. I think climate change is the foundation for really everything, because if you're looking at whether it is health or access to basic needs, or the threat that climate change poses, disproportionately to lower income communities, climate change is really has been and will continue to be, a focus of the impact investing world. I think that the pandemic has not only heightened, the lens on climate change, but also on creating a better future for everyone going forward.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about your organization, Works Llc. Tell us a little bit about that and what you guys are doing around online courses, books, and consulting.
Sure. So, I like I said, I've spent my career working with some of the wealthiest families and foundations, and it's been a privilege. But during the pandemic, I, kind of took a step back, and, there's so many people that want to do more and they just don't know how. And so I wanted to really bring sustainable investing to the masses. So I created this platform of online courses and have a book coming out as well. And, I still continue to consult, but in an effort to really have this inclusive community, I created Give, that will teach anyone how to invest sustainably. And my hope is that it helps, with this pain point of getting the information out to individuals, especially.
And why do you have this passion for individuals? I know we previously talked about the fact that some of this impact investing opportunities and vehicles have been reserved for more of the institutional players, but why do you feel that it's important to educate and make some of these things available to the retail?
Yeah, I think that I just see a world where, for the most part, there are so many people that are on the ground fighting, protesting climate change and protesting injustice, and they probably are unaware that they are likely also funding the same issues that they are advocating for. And I believe that, movements are made of the many. And so I wanted to get this information, especially to the people that are on the ground every day doing what they can to make the world a better place. Because I think that how we invest, it's often forgotten, and our money is one of the best tools that we have to advocate for a better world.
Yeah, and by the way, some of these questions are kind of rhetorical in the sense that we of course have worked with or have had IFC, World Bank, and others that are leading some of these major efforts, including the fact that really the big movement has to be ground up from the everyday average kind of the mainstream versus the Wall Street, right? So there are many, I think, online sites, services, even apps that are providing some degree of some of this information, and even those that are targeted to, let's say, women or people of color. Why do you feel that your approach is going to be better or different?
Yeah, so I've seen, kind of segmented pieces. So maybe it's focused on banking, or maybe it's focused on private investments. I wanted to kind of have a nonstop shop that goes through every single asset class and all different impact themes, but that was also written through the lens of a financial advisor. So another component to these courses, there's a financial planning course, a philanthropy course, and an impact investing course, because I felt that if someone didn't know how to manage their money, they weren't going to be able to take the steps to invest sustainably. And just knowing how to invest your money is a social justice issue in itself, or manage your money and how to invest, and kind of access to objective education. I think oftentimes when it comes to investments or financial management, there's the threat of solicitation. And so it's difficult to know what's what or what to believe. And so I wanted just an educational platform without the threat of being sold to, that just shares really great knowledge.
So I love the principles and the objective behind this. I think practically speaking, having also spent quite a bit of time in financial planning myself, have worked towards a CFP at some point, is that, people are people. And for most, let alone retirement planning, they do minimal to almost no planning. Unless you have sizable assets or you offload it to a financial advisor. Many people, especially, I would say more, it's gender-based to a great extent as well. Those that actually do a lot of financial planning tends to be a certain gender versus the other gender. How do we address some of these issues, right? Where some of it has to do with kind of immediacy versus our tendency not to plan and look ahead, for instance.
Don't forget to visit astorperkins.com to register for our next quarterly events. Past and current speakers include Damian Vaughn, former NFL player, Neil Gregory, Chief Thought Leadership Officer at the IFC World Bank, and many more. To register, visit astorperkins.com and click on Events.
Yeah, I think when I say financial planning, it's kind of more like wealth management. So I'm trying to, it's not just about looking forward. I think that it's managing the now as well. For example, so many people hold too much of their money in cash and don't realize that that is an opportunity cost, because they're likely losing money to inflation, but they're also missing out on returns, and they're missing out on the impact that money could be having. So I don't think that it's only about looking forward. I think some of it is in the now as well. And I think for a lot of people, they either have financial advisors and offload it, but they don't really know what their advisor is doing. And advisors have to listen to what the client is asking for. So my hope is that even if someone had a financial advisor, the courses would still educate them to be able to engage in conversations. I sat across the table from middle-aged women, especially, who had millions and millions of dollars and felt really empowered and intimidated by their wealth. And so I wanted these courses to really help people kind of take their power back, whether they worked with an advisor or not. Because I've tried to approach this not kind of from the nitty gritty, but here's what you need to know. And here's some exercises that you can do to get you the same information a financial advisor would be looking at to make decisions.
Yeah, I guess, kind of going back to the point that I was saying is that because generally when it comes to personal finance, whether we're talking about, asset allocation, rebalancing, strategic model portfolio, CAPM, is that the issue is for some people, regardless of gender, really don't bother to learn or to invest or to educate themselves. They rather, read Reddit and follow things and execute things on, Robinhood, for instance, than to actually understand the fundamentals, let alone the technical side. So, there's going to be a very small subset of people that are willing to absorb, take the time to learn, educate themselves. So how do we make it more pervasive and accessible to broader? And can you tell us a little bit about the online courses and how it's structured in such a way that it's, to your point, maybe as easy and accessible as possible?
Sure. So, my hope is I think that there's a lot of young people today that are driven by activism, and that if having impact is the catalyst to look at how you manage your money, then that is what gets them to the table. I think for others, they're more financially motivated, and knowing that they are leaving money on the table, so to speak. If that's what gets them to the table, then so be it. So the 3 courses, how they're structured, let's call it financial planning / investing course, really is a crash course of, if you went to a financial advisor, what they would be doing. So I have people set goals. I have them do a net worth statement, a cash flow statement. I have a crash course to investing that is goals-based investing, so that when someone comes out of that course, they have a very clear idea of how to manage their money in a way that meets their financial goals. The philanthropy course helps you identify what causes or that you want to support and helps you create a giving plan. And this includes kind of everyday activism, things you can do to advocate, volunteer, take care of the environment. And then the impact investing course goes through all the different asset classes and ties back into the financial plan that you theoretically created in the first course, to help you create an impact investing policy statement, so that you would be ready to invest in a way that supports your values. And the courses do not have to be taken together. I realize that they're best used together, but they can be taken individually. And the book really is largely the same information. I wanted products that were at different price points so that they could be accessible to everyone. The courses obviously are more interactive. They have templates that you can use for the different exercises and all kinds of articles and videos and things like that. But largely the course and the book, they follow the same outline.
So let's, again, just to kind of wrap up here, to make it as practical as possible, and let's give it a kind of a persona. So we're talking about somebody in their late 20s, maybe early 30s,
Yeah.
Gen Zs, millennials. Maybe they don't have a tremendous amount of accumulation at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say they have a few $1,000s sitting in Robinhood or some checking account. What can they do now to use that money in a meaningful way towards sustainability, specifically climate change?
Sure. So number one, and I will always say this is number one, is your bank. So we know that the 60 largest banks have financed $3.8 trillion into fossil fuels since the Paris Climate Agreement. getting a better bank is step one to being a sustainable or impact investor. One website that's great to use, Green America, has a get a better bank guide. And there's also a website called Mighty Deposits that you can see the impact that your money is currently having in your bank, as well as find credit unions or community banks in your area. I would say step two is you have to define your financial goals so that any investments that you're making are suitable for you, and whether that is in bonds or stocks, considering that someone wouldn't have a lot of capital to invest. But there's a few great things to do with some extra cash. There's an investment called the Calvert Impact Note. It is a loan fund. They've had billions of dollars invested in them. And it essentially, you can invest for a minimum of $20 and do it through your brokerage account. It's super simple. And it essentially invests in a network of community development, financial institutions, and nonprofits. There's all different, and it's global. Their investments are global as well, which is kind of neat. So they have many environmentally focused initiatives within that portfolio. And that's a really accessible investment.
I like that. I think that's fantastic. And again, without getting into the specific nature of the kind of interests and so forth, is, and again, depending on their age and risk tolerance and so forth,
Sure.
So fixed income may not be as appropriate for them, but I think certainly from a value alignment makes a ton of sense. Any last comment before we wrap it up here for today?
Just, I think, to remember that, we're always voting with our dollar, and all investments have an impact, and just be mindful of, that you're using your money in a way that aligns with your values.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. And I've been joined by Rebecca David, who is the founder of Give. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
If you've enjoyed this episode, take a moment to rate our show on any podcast platform that you listen to. Scroll down to the bottom and push 5 stars. It's that easy. And as always, thanks for listening.